justice will be served, that the right people will be in jail because they know just what they done and how they done, and that justice will be served.
Carla Hughes and Avis Banks, two beautiful Black women on our screen that had so much in common that in another world, they probably could have been the best of friends. Both of them came from the same state. They both had similar core values instilled in them from an early age. They both eventually moved to the same town in their adult lives, and they even had similar career paths involving children. Their interests were so in tune that it would eventually lead to one of them being murdered. Like many others, today's twisted cheating scandal involves a story of manipulation, red flags, and narcissism. There's definitely a lesson or two we can learn from today's case, and an ending that is sure to leave you unsettled. Join me as we discuss the horrific case of Avis Banks, Carla Hughes, and Keon Pittman. Today we are traveling to Jackson, Mississippi, which is a predominantly Black town. And in this town, a beautiful Black woman would get a second chance at love after her first relationship ended in shambles, resulting in her becoming a single mother. Carla Hughes was born on June 12, 1981. Nowadays, everyone is obsessed with zodiacs, so that makes her a Gemini. At the tender age of just 6 weeks old, she was adopted by her aunt and uncle. As she grew up, some of her pastimes included horseback riding, beauty pageants, and being studious, as she was an honor student. So, not only did Carla have beauty, but she also had the brains to match. Carla went on to earn her bachelor's degree from the University of Southern Mississippi in the early 2000s, followed by her master's in education from Belhaven College, and lastly, was pursuing her doctorate in education during the time of this case. So as you can see, Carla had the charm, the looks, and brains to land just about any man her heart desired. So circling back to her first relationship in 2004, it ended in a disaster when the love of her life ditched her on the day before their wedding, stating that he was suffering from quote-unquote pre-wedding jitters. A now broken down Carla was just 1 day shy of being left at the altar and 2 months pregnant. So Carla had no choice but to move on. She would go ahead and give birth to a beautiful baby boy and start to pick up the pieces of her life again. Fast forward 2 years later, she would go on to meet a new Prince Charming, and this one came with all the bells and whistles. Avis Banks was a Mississippi native born August 18, 1979, making her a Leo. Although her parents didn't make much money, the family was rich in other areas. They were rich in love. They were a tight-knit family that cared deeply for one another. Avis was one of 3 children who attended Warren Central High School and was a part of the graduating class of 1997. She furthered her education at Alcorn State University. Being the first college graduate of her family, she majored and got a degree in early childhood development. Not too long after graduating college, Avis would meet and, with approval of her father, eventually start dating a smooth young Black man who she thought was the love of her life. So much so that she picked up and moved to Jackson, Mississippi with him after he had gotten a job opportunity to start teaching at a Chastain middle school. Keon Pittman was a fellow teacher at Chastain Middle in Jackson, Mississippi. He was friendly, handsome, charming, and very confident, and quickly caught the attention of the new cheerleading coach, who also happened to be teaching language arts. Carla immediately fell in love with Keon, who was the basketball coach there. Their relationship was one of the worst kept secrets in the school. And you're probably asking yourself, why does the relationship need to be a secret? Well, you'll soon find out. Carla was so infatuated with Keon that she even had some of her students pass love notes to him during school hours. She wanted everyone to know that he was her man and her man only. At one point, they even snuck away for a romantic weekend getaway. But there was only one problem with this union. One of them was in a relationship, and it wasn't Carla. Yeah, Keon was not only in a relationship, but he was engaged to another woman. And to add a little sprinkle to the mix, that woman was also pregnant with their first child together. Now, it's unclear as to what Keon said to Carla to convince her to be with him, but clearly it didn't take much because she was well aware of his pre-existing relationship and she knew who his fiance was and wanted to make her presence known. So she continued pursuing him with the intent of getting Keon to leave his pregnant fiance. And what makes this whole situation even worse is that Carla knew all too well the feeling of heartbreak by a fiance, only to turn around and become a villain in a similar storyline for another woman who was also pregnant like her. Carla was wholeheartedly convinced that Keon was going to leave his fiance for her. The logistics of their relationship were quite simple. Whenever they wanted to meet up, they would go over to Carla's place for obvious reasons. It would be kind of hard to carry on a secret relationship at Keon's place, being that, he had a whole fiance living there as well. The person he's supposed to be marrying soon. Yeah, her. So their relationship would carry on as such until Carla's delusion would finally crash and burn when Keon finally let her know that he would not be leaving his fiance for her. He confirmed that for him, there really weren't any deep emotions for Carla. And to add further insult to injury, Keon was only interested in her because she was fun. Something to get his rocks off, if you will. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. That's all. So that conversation didn't go so well for Carla, and she took it very hard. She took things so horribly that she started stalking Keon and his fiancée, Avis Banks. She even made threats to Keon, stating that she would reveal their affair to Avis. And surprisingly, despite this nasty revelation, Carla still continued seeing Keon, as if he didn't just reveal that he was using her for sex. But when you're delusional, anything is possible, I guess. There was even a time where the engaged couple, Keon and Avis, planned a trip to go see Avis's family during the holidays. I believe it was Thanksgiving. Carla took it upon herself to book a hotel not too far from where they were staying at Avis's family's home. During this time, Keon was constantly on his phone, either outside or away from people in hearing range, always texting, and Avis was not oblivious to this behavior. And after a while, the family actually started to pick up on his lack of interaction, if you will. So much so that an altercation between Avis's sister and Keon ensued. She was not playing games, and she knew that Keon was up to no good and did not want him playing around with her sister. Avis never really confronted Keon about what was going on as far as his behavior, but there were always subtle acknowledgments of what was happening. And Keon more than likely knew that something was being suspected, but if she wasn't going to say anything, neither was he. And he also knew that Avis wasn't going anywhere, which is why he felt so comfortable being able to have all of these side girlfriends. He even had a second job at a bar where he would invite all of these girls that he would rotate to come spend time with him at the job, because he knew Avis was not the type of woman to chase after him or to follow up on what he was doing. And Carla eventually became a part of that rotation until she was ready to clear shop, and that included Avis Banks. And in the same trip, Carla informs Keon that she's nearby and wants to see him. Do you know that Keon actually left Avis's family home to go be with Carla? Keon may have told Carla that she was nothing more than a good time, but I think deep down inside, he was starting to grow feelings for her, at least more than he was willing to admit. So about 4 or 5 days preceding this disagreement, which ultimately ended in a fight, it all came crashing down. On November 29th, 2006, Avis Banks, the fiance to Keon Pittman, was found dead in their home. Keon had just come home from a basketball game to find his fiance murdered in their garage. In a panic, he ran over to his neighbor's house and had them call 911. The police determined that Avis died somewhere between 5:50 and 6 p.m. But what they also noticed and confirmed was that the dispatch call took place at 8:45 p.m. That's nearly 3 hours later. So what happened in between that time? According to Keon, he came home and found Avis in the garage on the driver's side of the car on the ground. She had been shot several times and stabbed. Now, in case you forgot one important detail, Keon and Avis were expecting their first child together. And unfortunately, the injuries that were sustained affected both Avis and their unborn child, as they were both deceased. The inside of their home was also attacked. It had been staged to appear as a robbery, although nothing was missing. The door had been kicked in and the entire home was ransacked. The only physical evidence that was found at the scene of the crime was a bloody shoe print. The police were immediately concerned that Avis may have been sexually assaulted. However, that was ruled out during the autopsy, thankfully. So once the investigation launched, detectives had one suspect, which was the most obvious person, the fiance, Keon. There were several oddities that the investigators noticed. For one, Keon would normally enter the home through the front door, never the garage. So what made him change his routine on that particular day? That definitely seems suspicious. Not condemning, but still suspicious. Number two is that he ran to his neighbor's house to call 911 instead of using the cell phone he conveniently had on him. Why? The reason is truly disappointing. Keon was on the phone with a woman. And no, it was not Carla. And after he got off the phone with her, then he called Carla. And by the time he finally got off the phone with Carla, he made it over to his neighbor's house where 911 was contacted. So that means he prioritized both of his mistresses before his dying fiance and unborn child. Keon is about as narcissistic as they come. But luckily for Keon, the only thing going for him to exonerate himself as a suspect was the fact that he had a solid alibi during the time of the murder. He was at a basketball game where he had several witnesses confirm his whereabouts. But as avid true crime viewers, we know that just because he had a solid alibi doesn't mean that he didn't have a part in the demise of his fiancée and unborn child. Once the autopsy had been completed, it revealed that Avis had been shot in the leg, twice in the chest, and once in the head. In addition to that, she was stabbed 3 times in the stomach and her throat was slashed. Unfortunately, Avis suffered a horrendous death. Since Keon had been cleared as a suspect, detectives decided to pay a visit to his school to obtain more information about him and his personal life. This is where the pieces of the puzzle would start to come together. All of Keon's co-workers were devastated over the news pertaining to the sudden death of his fiancée and unborn child. They attested to him being at the game. However, they also attested to him being a player off the courts as well. Hint, hint, wink, wink, sprinkle, sprinkle. So once investigators heard everything that his co-workers had to say about him, they decided to pay a certain somebody a visit. They made their way over to the language arts teacher's room and wanted to get her side of things. Now, although Carla was well aware of the relationship between Keon and Avis, she put on an Oscar award-winning performance for the investigators, or at least so she thought. She expressed true sentiment towards the devastating news of her close friend's fiance and unborn child passing. And if that wasn't fake enough for you, Carla went on to say that she was never involved in any type of romantic relationship with Keon whatsoever. But little did she know that investigators had already spoken to her co-workers and she was put on blast, both her and Keon. They divulged to Carla how they were made aware that they were so out in the open with their relationship that students even came forward stating how they would deliver love notes from her to her boyfriend. Initially, investigators had no physical evidence to tie Carla to the crime scene, and the only evidence that they had was her cell phone GPS showing that she was near the home at the time of the murder. And in response, Carla claimed that she was there because she was visiting a friend at the time who lived nearby. So when they did a search of Carla's home, they found a shoe. And that shoe had the same print as the one they found on Keon and Avis's door. And that same shoe also had Avis's blood on it. It wasn't until her cousin ratted her out that her turkey was truly cooked. Patrick Nash, which is a cousin of Carla, came to police after he heard about the murder on TV. Patrick had a gut feeling that there was a connection between his gun, the one that Carla asked him to borrow, and this dead woman on the news. He admitted that not a few days before Avis's murder, Carla had come to him wanting to borrow his .38 revolver and a knife for quote-unquote protection. When she returned the gun back to him on December 1st, 2006, the revolver did not have any bullets in it, despite the fact that he gave it to her fully loaded. The knife that he also allowed her to borrow was never returned. It seems that Carla had an answer for everything because she claimed the reason why there weren't any bullets in the gun was because she took it to the gun range to use for target practice. Now, I'm pretty sure investigators were able to go down there and find out that this claim was also false. The police were able to positively match the gun to the bullet that they found at the crime scene. The gun that Carla borrowed from her cousin was in fact the murder weapon. All of her dirty laundry was finally getting aired out during trial. Carla's family tried to back her up as well as represent her as much as they could. Her lawyer even tried to pin the murder on Keon. He proved that he was a severe womanizer. So much so, apparently Keon was getting quite cozy with one of the mothers of his basketball players. Why would such a man want to be tied down to just one woman? A question he had for the jury.
The Carla Hughes murder trial, he told the court about his affair with Hughes, and he described the day he found his pregnant fiance murdered in their garage.
16 WAPT's Catherine Kite is following this case from the courtroom. She's live now. Catherine, tell us what was going on during Pittman's testimony.
Well, Brad and Stephanie, the jury took in every word and kept their eyes glued to Carla Hughes and Keon Pittman while Keon told about their 4-month love affair. Carla showed no facial expression, but sometimes whispered to her attorney and took notes while Keon talked about their love affair. Keon Pittman testified he and Carla Hughes met at Chastain Middle School in August 2006, just 1 month after he and his fiance Avis Banks found out they were expecting a baby. Keon says his and Carla's relationship quickly turned romantic. He says it all started when he went to Carla's apartment one day in August. He says they had sex and referred to their 4-month affair as a sexual adventure. Meanwhile, Avis Banks' family filled the courtroom, many times cringing and gasping at the details of the affair. At one point during the testimony, he admitted to playing a role in Avis's death.
Mr. Pittman, did you kill Avis Banks?
No.
Do you feel any responsibility for her death?
Yes.
Tell me how.
If I would have stayed faithful to who I was with, if I had been thinking poorly, making bad choices, or made a bad choice to sleep around and flirt with other women, this chain of events would have never taken place, bro.
And Keon Pittman also testified about the night he came home to Avis in his house and found that she had been murdered. He said he opened up the garage door and saw her body laying there in the garage. He said he ran up to her, hugged her, kissed her on the lips. After that, he ran inside to see if he could find anybody. But the question and the statement that has everybody here at the courthouse talking, he says he didn't call 911 on his cell phone. He says he ran next door and used the neighbor's phone to call 911. He says His phone is a nationwide phone and can't make local calls. We're live at the Madison County Courthouse. Catherine Kite, 16 WAPT News.
Carla's family claimed that this type of behavior was completely unheard of. The mother and former beauty pageant was a saint in the eyes of the family.
2 days after the 2006 murder, Carla Hughes sat down with police detectives. She wasn't under arrest and talked to them for an hour and a half, and they taped it. Jurors in the Hughes trial saw that tape today. Hughes told police she and Keon Pittman were just friends and that she never told him to leave his fiance, Avis Banks. Also today, a key witness took the stand and testified Pittman was at a basketball practice at the time of the murder.
Did you receive a call from Keon Pittman?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what the nature of that conversation was?
To tell me that he found Avis dead.
Okay. What did y'all talk about? Or what was he talking about?
As far as I remember, that was all he said.
Could you tell what kind of emotional and mental state he was in, or how did he seem to you?
Normal.
Hughes is charged with killing Avis Banks and her unborn child. If convicted, Hughes could get the death penalty.
There was no doubt in the eyes of the prosecution that Carla had gunned down not one, but two innocent lives that day. The DA believed that she killed Avis so that Keon would finally be with her and her alone.
The young lady that's on trial, I guess she felt that she was in love, and sometimes we don't even know what love is. But I do feel, though, he initiated the whole situation. And I believe that he does understand that. And hopefully he will change from this.
And much like the last twisted cheating scandal we discussed, she had no idea that there was still more competition outside of Avis. The DA went on to say that this whole thing was a crime of passion. She murdered an innocent child and its mother because she was jealous of a wedding that was never going to be hers. Evidence shows that Carla was in the right place at the right time. She knew the victim and had a personal vendetta against her. Carla also had shoes which contained blood that belonged to the victim. Those same shoes also had the same pattern that was found on the door that was kicked in at the home of Avis and Keon. Her cousin had given her a gun that was emptied and proven to be the same gun that killed Avis, and she was also given a knife which was never recovered. Despite all of this evidence stacked up against Carla, her family still believed that she was framed and didn't have proper representation. It took the jury 8 hours to deliberate and come back with a verdict. Carla was convicted and found guilty of 2 counts of murder. She was almost served the death sentence according to her dad, but he begged on her behalf for anything other than a death sentence.
Death for killing Avis Banks, who was 5 months pregnant. Listen in as the judge read the sentence.
All right, as to count 1, the verdict or the sentence is, we the jury find that the defendant should be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. As to count 2, the sentence is, we the jury find the defendant should be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
16 WAPT's Catherine Kite got reaction outside the courtroom after Hughes learned her fate.
1, the verdict or the sentence is, we the jury find that the defendant should be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
After hearing her sentence, Carla Hughes waved and said bye to her family and friends while deputies led her out of the courtroom. Avis Banks and Carla Hughes' fathers hugged each other. What did you tell them?
We both lost, I'm sorry. I know that, they weren't that type of people. They didn't raise Carla like that. And I'm just sorry, And we just embraced each other.
Wednesday morning, Carla Hughes' father pleaded with the jury to save his only child's life.
The thing to you is, I'm not asking you. I'm pleading with you to spare my daughter's life.
After just 30 minutes of deliberations, the jury sentenced Carla Hughes to life in prison without parole. Both prosecutors and defense attorneys say there's a sense of relief the trial is over.
But we're just glad that the Banks family are now able to bring some closure to this.
We did, I don't think we changed anything that we did unless Ms. Hughes decided she wanted to change something, and she would have to tell us that.
Carla Hughes is headed to the Rankin County Detention Center. That's where she'll spend the rest of her life. Her 5-year-old son is now in the custody of her parents. Reporting from the Madison County Courthouse, Catherine Kite, 16 WAPT News.
Today's twisted cheating scandal only serves to prove that jealousy will turn the sweetest person into a spiteful murderer. I do want to give condolences to the families of Avis, Keon, and Carla. Carla's son will now grow up without a mother in his life. Avis's family will no longer get to meet the grandchild that they were expecting, nor see Avis's face ever again. And Keon's family will never get to also meet the grandchild they too were expecting, or welcome in the daughter/sister-in-law into the family as one of their own. As for Keon, he was cleared of all charges related to the murder of his fiance and unborn child. However, in a situation like this, I do believe that when you, as the cheater, invite another person into your relationship, and as a direct result, your person is murdered, to some degree, the cheater should be held responsible too. In my opinion, if it can be proven that your infidelity played a part in the result of your partner's murder, then there should definitely be some sort of punishment. Obviously, not as extensive as the person who actually committed the crime, but something. There are too many times where cases like this are fueled by the selfishness of the person in the middle of all the chaos. And that same person gets to walk out of the situation without a scratch, getting another chance at life and starting fresh, while everyone else is left in shambles. Ultimately, this would result in people taking relationships and marriages more seriously, which would in turn minimize stories like these from occurring. If the cheater had never invited an outsider and manipulated that outsider, or had given the outsider any impression that they had a chance with them, then there's a high probability that your partner may not have been targeted. And what's sad about this situation is the fact that he knew he was never going to be serious with Carla, but he was still extremely reckless to the point that he flaunted this relationship publicly with no regards. And he also had other girlfriends on top of that. Cheaters will find the time to do any and everything but be honest with their partner. But in any case, although Keon may not have been guilty in the eyes of the court, he will forever be condemned with the guilt of losing his entire future over his selfish actions. Since the trial, Keon went on to start a new relationship and got married. And I pray and hope he learned an extremely valuable lesson and changed his ways for the better before something like this happens again or worse. So my question to you all is this: do you believe that cheating should be considered a criminal offense if it resulted in murder or something already illegal, regardless of whether the cheater had a hand in the crime or not? Do you think that's fair? Yes or no, and why? And if it was a criminal offense, do you think that people would actually take their relationships more seriously, or do you think they would just try to get craftier with how they cheat? And after you're done commenting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's free. We're on the road to 2K. And if you want to see more videos like the one you just finished watching, check out the playlist on the screen. Thank you guys again for stopping by, and stay safe out there, DTC family. See you in the next one.